So let's jump right into it. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. So,
Yeah. Well, tell me, let's level set a little bit for folks that may not know your background a little bit and that are
yeah,
meeting you for the first time. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
absolutely. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Adda Birnir. I'm the founder, and I guess now I'm like the general manager of Skillcrush since it was acquired by Power to Fly. So now I also serve as the chief product officer at Power to Fly, which means that I run our tech and product and design organization, meaning that I oversee all the product, design, and engineering team at Power to Fly. And we have a lot of exciting stuff that we are rolling out to you all in the next couple of months. But for the purposes of this call, what I'm excited to talk about is specifically how we work with our students at Skillcrush. So Skillcrush, for those of you who are not aware, is an online education company. And what we do is we train students to become software engineers and UI UX designers. And our bread and butter is to work with career changers, and especially career changers who, are sort of underrepresented in tech. And we've been doing that for 12 years. So we have, a long track record and a lot of experience in all types of market conditions, helping especially students who are looking to break into their first role in tech and all the sort of job search strategies that need to go into that. And that's kind of what I was planning to focus on today.
Amazing. Let's get into it. So, how can job seekers create a resume or a portfolio that truly stands out in today's competitive job market? It is tough out there right now.
It is tough out there. We're definitely seeing that with our students. So that, it's going to sound really basic, but obviously just having a portfolio and a resume. I mean, our specialty is really looking at developers and designers. And in both of those instances, and particularly the portfolio is super, super important. And we do have a lot of guidance for our students around how to position your portfolio. And, that's something we work with them a lot on. But number one is have the portfolio, right? In tech in particular, your portfolio is really what is used to gauge that you can do the work. And this is one of the major ways that students can get around any sort of concerns around credential qualification. So fortunately in tech and in engineering and software engineering in particular, that is an area of engineering that has the lowest rate of engineers in jobs who have degrees in engineering. But you do still see that type of qualification expectation on a lot of job listings. You also see a lot of experience qualifications, even for entry level. And the number one way that you can sort of work around that is by having proof of your ability to do the work, which is just work samples, which is usually presented. And the easiest way to present that is in a portfolio. So so just keep it up to date, put lots of stuff in there. We have people sort of, explain what the thing is. There's lots of, there's lots of specifics around that. And then resumes is a whole other exciting topic that I can get into with a lot more detail. Yeah.
Yeah, the portfolios, it's the show me, don't tell me, right? The proof is in the pudding.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what in an ideal world, what happens is your resume and maybe your cover letter get them to click through to your portfolio. And then the portfolio is really what closes the deal, at least in terms of getting you into an interview, is that they look at the portfolio and maybe they had some concerns about your lack of experience or your lack of credentials, but the work in the portfolio just speaks for itself. And then, they advance you to the next round.
Yeah. So for folks that are jumping in and job seeking right now, what's the first thing you recommend they do to their application to stand out?
Yeah. So one extremely tactical thing that is easier to do, is being really early in the application process. So, and this is like one of those like terrible, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to tell you to like have all the job alerts on your phone, right? And, to make that manageable, you really need to be very, very targeted with the types of opportunities that you do apply to, which I can talk about a little bit more. But so the very tactical thing is like the earlier you apply, the easier you're going to have it in terms of getting seen by the recruiter. Because what we hear from recruiters when we talk to them at Power to Fly and outside is that sort of at the beginning, when it's a little bit, maybe not even a trickle, but just like when it's first getting going, the job applications, they really can have time to look at every job application and really take time with it. But it starts to sort of ramp up usually, because often what happens is they get distributed on like a LinkedIn or something. And, LinkedIn like will kind of exponentially grow the audience of a job listing. So definitely being early is good. Hard, but it's going to be to your advantage. And then otherwise, what we work with our students is really about, we call, the way we refer to it as prospecting, but effectively what we're suggesting is that you network into the organization that you're invested in and try to get what is a warm, I guess, what do they call it? They call it like when you get like a reference basically from another person who works at the company. So your chances of getting interviewed and ultimately hired are significantly higher if you know someone within a company. And of course, nobody knows someone within every company that they're ever going to apply to. And so you have to figure out a way to solve that problem. And the way that you solve it is by basically functioning as like a salesperson for yourself and doing outbound outreach on your own behalf into company,
Yeah.
which sounds really intimidating, but it's not as bad as it sounds. But it is unbelievably effective. Like I can't even tell you how effective this is. This is like the number one strategy we work on with our students. And the biggest things that this does is not only does it get around any sort of like issues of, oh, there's 3,000 applicants or the ATS is filtering people out or anything like that, but it also, what we find is that often our students end up in this process getting considered for another role that either wasn't listed or wasn't listed yet, or maybe they just hadn't realized was a good fit for them. So it's really effective in terms of sort of uncovering other opportunities that you weren't aware of.
Yeah, that's huge. So networking is a huge aspect in the job search. Like you said, that warm introduction, referral. How can folks network better and do these to make these opportunities happen for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't, the question of how can you network better is a really big one. But I think the most important thing you can do in the job search is really be very targeted with what jobs you're looking for. And I think, and be really realistic about what is going to be likely to work for you. And I guess there's a really awesome guy named Phil Terry. And if you guys don't know him, he has this organization he runs called Never Search Alone. It's particularly good for people who are looking to break into tech or who are just looking for work in tech. But I think a lot of the principles apply across the board. So he has this term he's coined called candidate market fit. And it's a play on product market fit for all you product nerds out there. And basically the construct is that you identify the type of role, the level of the role, and the type of company that is a good fit for you, where both you're going to want the job and they're going to want you. I think this is a really, really important thing to think about, and take the time to really think deeply about it and understand that it can't just be driven by what you want. It has to also have sort of a relationship to the market, right? Like we might all want a VP job at a certain big company or whatever, but that just might not be realistic for us. And you're better off sort of being clear-eyed about that and then really spending your efforts on jobs. And I don't mean to say that you should like undershoot your goals, but I just think that sometimes when we're feeling really, really stressed out and really want a job, that there's kind of a spray and pray mentality. And we do believe in applying to a lot of jobs, but we also believe in being really targeted. And like one example of how we operationalize this with our students, or like one of the ways in which like we coach our students is that, but we have a lot of data now on our students and where they get jobs. And time and again, what we have seen with our students is like there's a sort of they tend to sort of, what's the word, like most of their jobs fit into a couple of categories, and really it's industry. So the number one type of company our students get jobs at is marketing agencies. So these are the types of agencies that are like high volume website creation, a lot of different projects, And that's a very, very good, they like entry-level talent. It's great opportunity for people who are entry level because you get exposure to so many projects and in a quick time frame. So it's a really good fit for somebody who's looking to break into software engineering or design. And then other ones that we've seen are a lot of traction for our students is government jobs and higher education, interestingly enough. So yeah, but it's like, what we don't see success with our students is like the FAANG companies. They do not like to hire entry-level career changers. They will hire you after another company has hired you and given you a couple of years of experience. So we have alumni who now work at those companies, but as a first step, that is not usually a good sort of, as Phil Terry calls it, candidate market fit for somebody who is maybe in their mid-30s looking to transition from, let's say, teaching into a software engineering role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you touched on some of the mistakes that people make, like the spray and pray, which I had never heard that rhyme before, which is hilarious and I love it. What are some other common mistakes that people make in job searching and how can they be avoided?
Hmm. Um, that's a good question. I mean, I think that I really think spray and pray is the big thing you want to not do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's lots of tactical stuff around. I didn't answer the question about resumes, but resumes are obviously an area where there are things that you can do that are better and worse. But that said, I will also say that, like, okay, sorry, I do have answers to this question. The answer is A, don't spray and pay. B, don't think that applying to jobs is enough. Right. So and these are related behaviors. Like what we see with students is like when they get very anxious and stressed out, all of which is very understandable because job searching is stressful, especially in a bad market. They will start to apply to every job that they see, but all they will do is apply. And we have sometimes been as bold as to say that, like, we have people we ask them to apply to 30 jobs a week. And we will say, if all you did was submit your resume, like just fill out the form and you didn't email anybody and you didn't do any outreach, we will not actually count that as a job application. We do not, that is how little efficacy we think that is as a tactic. So we won't count to your 30 count. You have to prove to us that you also did outbound outreach.
I love that. And you picked up the psychic vibes from the chat while you were talking. Someone just asked, is there a number of outreach per day, week, month that you would suggest for job seekers? And you just nailed it. So that is perfect.
Yeah,
So
and I would say, like, the goal, our thought process with 30 is that we have this, our goal is to get a student. Our belief is that you should get one interview for every 20 applications, right? That's what we're looking at as our metric is, and again, if the 20 applications are filled with like random companies and random roles that aren't a good fit for you, then you're not going to be able to hit the 1 in 20, right? So it goes back and forth. Like you shouldn't have to, if you're getting, let's say you're getting like 5 out of 20, then you probably could apply to more. And if you are not getting 1 in 20, then you need to look at the 20 and be like, what is happening here? So basically what you want is a ratio of 1 out of every 20 jobs you apply to gets you an interview. And then I think our estimate was that you will get a job offer for every 10 jobs you interview for. So, and that's just how we back into the 30. Does this math make sense? So the point being that it's all about the speed at which you need to get a job.
totally.
So if
As you
you're
said,
trying,
yeah, it's cumulative, right? There's a reason that there's the stacked order and that you're being intentional about which ones. Because if you're just willy-nilly, well, of course you're not getting follow-up interviews because you're not a right fit for that job. But if you're intentional about this, then these numbers start to make sense. So I'd love to hear about some resume or portfolios that you've come across that really jumped out to you and were super memorable.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. For portfolios, what you really want to see is that the portfolio really demonstrates the personality of the person, right? Like you want it to be unique. So I'm thinking about one portfolio that a student did that was just really, just the more that it kind of feels like only you could have made it, the better. Obviously within reason, like it shouldn't be like so out there, like it needs to like fit sort of the regular parameters of a portfolio. But the goal would be to really just demonstrate your skill. And I think especially with designers, the portfolio itself becomes a design object, right? So it's particularly important to design with a portfolio versus a developer, where you kind of want a simple design that's just very templated is actually appropriate for a developer. And then you can really focus on the meat of the coding, sort of the development work. I think that we have a lot more sort of really aggressive guidelines for resumes of don'ts. So we have lots of don'ts on resumes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think they're going to surprise anybody, but they're worth sort of calling out, right? So a big one for us is that students often want to write really long resumes, especially if they've had long careers. And we're not the only one-page people. We think that you should try to keep it to one page, but especially for people who've been in the workforce for a while, if you've been in the workforce for more than 10 years, it can be appropriate to include a second page. So we will allow that. There's no circumstances under which you should have a third page, unless you're like 95, and then I'll let you do it. Other things that we want to see is we want like a nice design. Layout is important. You don't want to have any, like, you don't want images, like don't put your photo on it. That's pretty uncommon for American job seekers, but that's something you see sometimes in other parts of the world. And then, bullet points, be outcome based. I mean, there's a lot of specifics around that, but I think the biggest, a major concern we hear from people is sort of this scary feelings about the ATS system. So ATSs are applicant tracking systems, and there's a lot of fear among job seekers that I'm getting filtered out for some reason. I have some keyword that's wrong. And this is actually something we have a lot of insight into here at Power to Fly, because we actually use the same technology that ATSs use for a lot of our work. So we've played around with this a lot, and so I can share with you some of the sort of like do's and don'ts of ATSs. So one of them is most of what I'm saying is going to be a best practice for a person. It's going to be a best practice for a robot, right? So good design, clarity, brevity, all those things. The only thing that I have seen in testing that gets a little tricky is your job title. And basically what happens is if your job title, ATSs will have like a standard database of job titles that they're working from, right? And so they're like, oh, it says web developer, that's a web developer. But if your title doesn't map to one that they have clearly, they will try to make a guess. And this is the only place where I've seen them frequently be like way off. And the concern with that would be if they're way off, like for example, I remember we were testing a resume once, and I forget what the title was, but it was DevOps something. And it was like, oh man, I wish I should have written it down. But basically there was something about it that made it think it was a construction worker. So it was an engineer, and it classified them as like a construction worker title, like a mechanical, like something. And that would be a concern, because that will actually make the ATS think you're not a good fit for the role, even if you are a good fit for the role, right? That kind of discrepancy. And so this is the only place where like you want to be a little bit careful if you have a job title that isn't like super, super standard for the role that you were in, then you might want to consider either changing the title on your resume or having both, like putting like your actual title and then maybe like a description, like a more standard title. And I was looking this up, like the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has standard titles, which is what most ATSs are using, or at least that's a starting point for them. So when in doubt, consider what would the BLS classify me as, and opt for that title. But stuff that's like really standard, web developer, software engineer, like that's going to be like totally fine. And you don't need to worry about it.
So many wonderful, actionable gems in that whole section there. Thank you so much for that. That's just like power packed. I love it. I love it. So, how important is it in building a strong online presence? What strategies would you recommend for developing a personal brand? Do we need to be making videos? Do we need to be posting all the time of our things we've made? What's the way to have a nice, well rounded personal brand?
I mean, I think it depends on the role that you're applying for. And I think that I hesitate to suggest anything that doesn't feel authentic to you, right? So yes, like writing about your work, right? Like I mean, I all of my expertise is in tech. Like yeah, if you're a developer who writes about their work a lot, um that's really cool, right? Like that is unusual. That's going to set you apart because engineers, I mean, I freaking love engineers. I really do. Like I think they're some of the funnest people to work with. But sort of it's not, marketing people maybe are known for writing lots of stuff on LinkedIn. Engineers, not as much, right? So like, yeah, there's opportunity, and that's something to think about too, is like, how do you sort of set yourself apart in a good way from sort of your cohort of people? So certainly if you're inclined to write, that would be a great thing for you to do. Like, even if you just do it on LinkedIn or something. You don't want to have sort of, yeah, like if I look someone up and I like can't find them, that might be a little bit of a concern. But again, it depends on the role, right? Like if I did that for a marketing person, yeah, I'd be very concerned. If I did that for an engineer, I'd be like, well, that seems normal, right? But as long as you have like GitHub and a portfolio, then it's fine, So I think it really just depends on the role that you're going for. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those looking to switch industries or career paths, how can they effectively highlight those transferable skills in their job search?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I mean, it's not an easy question to answer in this forum, but it's absolutely possible. And like a really good example is a student of ours who was a personal chef. And she had this really great little like description on her bio on LinkedIn, which it's just still up there, which is basically like, as a new software engineer, I have this she basically just explained how being a chef is very similar to being a software engineer. Sort of like you have this set of ingredients and you have a limited toolkit and it's very detail oriented and like all these things. So I think it's figuring out how to tell that story in a way that is authentic and true to who you are. And I do think that can be hard to do on your own. So this is another area where sort of getting support even if it's from like a friend of yours or something like that, to like look it over and see like, does this make sense? Does this sound good? But I think it's a worthwhile effort.
Yeah. The chef that translated their job description, I can now say that's the first job description that has ever made my mouth water on a call. I was like, what is happening? But it's the sensory experience. And they're like, ooh, I'm in. You hooked me. That is fascinating. And I get to know more about that person.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And it makes her interesting, right? So yeah, I think don't be afraid to be who you are in the job search.
Mm-hmm.
I think
So we have,
that'll
yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left, and we got a few great questions from the audience that I would love to touch on here. Diana says and asks, outreach can be tricky. The job posters typically do not reply in my experience. I attempt to connect with folks who are in the roles I am interested in. Any suggestions on best practices and what to say to those people when I'm reaching out?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I feel like she's already doing one of the things I would suggest, which is not to limit to the hiring manager, but to also go to other people in the organization, especially in the same role. So that's really smart. I think that, this is where you just get into sort of sales and marketing best practices, right? This is effectively a sales and marketing task. And yeah, you want to personalize it to the person. You want to not ask for too much right off the bat in terms of what your ask is. You want to, it's sort of just relationship building. And I think, I would experiment with different approaches and different ways to go about it. I think your number one goal is just to learn from the person, to meet them. It's not necessarily to get them to do something specific for you.
Mhm.
And then also just understand that like you are not going to have like a 90% hit rate here, right? Like there's no sales and marketing effort. Like, I don't even know. Like we have a new business development representative or a sales development representative at Power to Fly. And like I would love him to set us all straight on like what is a normal percentage of response rate, right? Like it's totally normal to get a low response rate. So I think as individuals, that's like we don't have that experience in life a lot, especially if we're not in sales roles, so that can feel really crappy. Even like you could be like let's say 2 out of every 10 people you like emailed responded to you, that would probably be like a phenomenal rate of response from the industry standard, but that's not going to feel very good. So I think just sort of like having that benchmark will help you feel better about your performance in this. uh, so yeah.
And
Um,
we had another
so if you
question.
can go in person, anyone you can meet in person will be a easier process. So anything you can do to be in person, like networking, events, anything is gonna.
There is no substitution for an in-person experience.
There's not.
Yeah. And that's perfect. Someone asked, what are the forms of outreach used that you would recommend? So going in person if you can, but if it is in the digital space, what do you see have the best success rate?
Yeah, for us, it's definitely email to their work email. That's what we would recommend. A lot of people do LinkedIn, and that can work, but it doesn't work as well in our experience.
Yeah,
So.
because their volume is probably very high, and a lot of them too are generic messages that aren't
Yeah,
personalized.
or just, I mean, I totally do this. Like, I just don't always look at LinkedIn, and then like, I think I find out when someone messages me, but it gets like organized somewhere in Gmail where I don't even see it. So I just think that's part of it too. Like most everyone is checking their business email every day, at least once a day. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's the best way to keep the conversation going with you if folks want to reach out?
yes, I actually have I don't know if can I share this in the chat? How does this work? I'm gonna paste this link right here. So we would love to talk to you. Anyone who's on this call, I would love to talk to you. My team would love to talk to you. Like what we do is work with job seekers and explore opportunities for us to provide you with any type of support that you need. So I put the link in the chat. I'm not sure if you guys, does that show up to everybody? No, I think
We
they'll
will.
share it. Yeah, and if you go on LinkedIn, I would love to connect with you. And the link is also in my bio on LinkedIn. But really, like, book a 30-minute call. We'd love to understand where you're at, what your goals are, what your timeline is, and just figure out how we can support you either at Power to Fly or Skillcrush or whatever. So, yeah, of
Uh, Amazing. What a power half hour. Thank you so much.
course. It was great to
Yeah,
see you.
good to see you too.
Bye.
Bye.